You know, it's interesting that when I look at 28 years, for a lot of you, you think that I'm a young kid. I'm just starting to grow up, right? But it's interesting that as I was preparing this lesson, I just kind of went back and I reflected on my life and all of the things that I have gotten to see and witness and do. And as I looked at my life, as I surveyed my life, and as I looked around and I looked at the world throughout my life, you know, there are a couple of things that really stand out to me. Obviously, the biggest thing that stands out to me for my generation is probably 9/11. We are the 9/11 generation, in which we all, at some point during school, we witnessed some aspect of that attack. And then I think the next big marker for my generation as far as events that have shaken us to our core would probably be, if you lived in Virginia, would be the Virginia Tech shooting on April 16th, 2007. I can remember waking up that day and my mom giving me a call and she goes, "Have you seen the news?" And I was like, "No." And she said, "There's been a shooting at Virginia Tech." And I had multiple friends on that campus. And at that moment, I was in complete shock. I turned on the TV and I saw students and people scattering. I saw police forces surrounding the campus. And so I started calling all of the friends and all of the people that I knew at Virginia Tech just to make sure that they were okay. And, you know, it's interesting because I also saw the same type of fear, the same type of agony, the same type of pain over the last several weeks as across our news feeds at the bottom of our screens, whether we were watching football, whether we were watching our favorite show, whether we were just watching the news. We saw on the taper at the bottom of the news screen, shooting in Paris. And maybe the day before that you saw on your ticker, you know, massacre in Lebanon. And so we see the look of frightened people. And we also, as I remember, Geraldo Rivera was on TV talking to his daughter who was in Paris. Can you imagine that? You're a news broadcaster, and the moment that this attack's going down, you're on the phone with your daughter who's in Paris on the same block as that massacre. And you know, I'm not the only one that's seen really bad things happen to good people. I'm not the only one that has seen that. A lot of you saw the first roll of film from Vietnam. That was the first time in American history where there'd been, you know, live action footage of what war looks like. Some of you had the unfortunate event of serving in Vietnam. You know, some of you, though, through your TV, you watched the 444 days of the American hostage crisis in Iran. Some of you remember the scenes of Beirut, Lebanon, as the suicide bombers killed the Marines there in Lebanon. And some of you can recall with vivid accuracy the day that you watched John Kennedy get shot. And we've all seen horrible things happen around the world, and we've also seen things that we would call horrible happen within our own borders, our own country. Not necessarily a mass shooting, not necessarily a high-profile murder case, but some of you have experienced family members with sickness. Some of you have experienced the brokenness of family. Some of you here this morning haven't talked to your family members out of a dispute, out of a fight, out of brokenness in years. And you would describe that as a horrible, horrible feeling. Some of us here this morning have been abused throughout their entire life, whether that's physically or verbally. And so the images and the scarring seems like it will just never, ever go away. Or you know somebody very close to you that has experienced that. And so whether you've seen it or experienced it, there are times in your walk with God, maybe in the past, maybe now, and who knows, possibly even in the future, horrible things are going to happen to people around us. Horrible things might even happen to us, or you're going through a situation or circumstance right now where it seems like it is so dire. You're so alone that you don't think it's ever gonna go away. And so when our world seems to be falling apart, whether you've witnessed it, whether you've experienced it, we all seek, in times of trouble, in times of danger, in times of duress, we all want refuge. We all want to get away from the pain. We want to get away from the sorrow. We want to get away from the situation, the circumstance that we're in. And so we seek refuge. We seek comfort. We seek to be happy again. But sometimes that refuge takes form in a bottle. Sometimes a refuge takes form in a needle. Sometimes that refuge takes form in people that you know are not good for you. Sometimes that refuge takes form in a computer screen. And sometimes that refuge takes form in a drug. And sometimes that refuge takes form in just being away from everyone. And some of us have tried and tried and tried all of these things, and you still can't find peace. You know, I find it interesting that as children of light, see, we are children of light based upon Ephesians chapter 5, and it's so interesting that throughout the Gospel of John, you know, the author uses these terms, light and darkness, and even in Ephesians, these terms, you know, walk as children of light, even though you used to be dark. And so it's interesting to me that as children of light, we often tend to doubt in the dark what we've learned in the light. I mean, think about it. Remember when you were a little kid and you were so scared of the dark, and you know, you would go to sleep and you had your little nightlight, and there was that period of time where it was time to transition from nightlight to no nightlight? Some of y'all remember that. It was a scary time for me. Because remember, when the light's on and mom and dad are there, everything's okay. But once dad leaves and once dad goes to sleep and the light goes off, there's the boogeyman in the closet and there's the monster under the bed. Right? And you're like, Mom, help! Mom comes in, switches on the light. I'm here. What's going on? Okay, everything's okay now. But as soon as the light goes back off, there's the doubt. Can mom get me? Can mom and dad get here in time so that the boogeyman in the closet doesn't get me? Can mom and dad get here in time so that the monster under the bed doesn't consume me? And so often we do that with God. When everything's happy, when everybody has enough money, when everybody has healthy relationships, God is great, God is awesome, and I've invested my entire life, I've pushed all the eggs in the God basket. But as soon as those relationships break down, as soon as life breaks down, as soon as the world presses in, we say, what happened? Where in the world is God? And why doesn't He come and turn on the light again? And so we doubt in the dark what we learned in light. And I would submit to all of us this morning that there is a refuge whose fortress is unbreakable, even when everything around us seems to break. And in Psalm 46, we see a nation And we don't know the particular time, we don't know the particular place, we don't know the particular occurrence, but we see a nation of people who at the center of their physical life, of their physical world, is broken. They're under siege, they're under attack. And as we look around the world and we look at the culture in which we live in, as we look at world events, we often believe, and it's often true, that everything about our country and our world is darkness, despair, brokenness, violence, poverty. And we can get into the idea that God just isn't present, or what are we going to do about the current situation? Where are we going to find our refuge? Where are we going to find our fortress? And know what God says. And in this chapter, in this section, there's the famous verse, "Be still and know that I am God." But there is a greater context to that verse. Brothers and sisters, I would submit to you this morning that Psalm 46 answers the question about where we find our refuge in times of trouble, despair, and brokenness. And the answer is not what you might think it is. The fortress of our faith is God. And God is the fortress of our faith. Look with me for a second in chapter 46. Verse 1. God is our refuge and our strength, a very pleasant help when everything is going well. Is that what the text says? God is a refuge and our strength, a very pleasant help when the 401k and the IRA are maxed out. God is our refuge and our strength when everything in life is hunky-dory and everybody's holding hands singing Kumbaya. Is that what it says? No, he says God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. Do you understand that? That God is not just a God that is around and active in people's lives only when things are great, but he's also very present. I mean, he can't be any more present than he already is in trouble. And he's not a God that says, "Oh, well, you're not popular anymore, I'm not going to be with you. Oh, you're broken, you're dirty, you're nasty, your life's a wreck. Yeah, I don't have time for you." That's not what he says. He says he is a refuge. He is the escape plan. He is the strength builder. He is the fortress of your faith. And notice what the psalmist says. He says, in light of knowing that God is the refuge and that God is the strength, that he is as present as he can possibly be in times of trouble. In verse chapter 2, he says, "Therefore, we will not fear some of the time." Therefore, we will not fear some of the time. No, he doesn't say that, brothers and sisters. He says, therefore, we will not fear. And think about it from the psalmist's perspective. If God is as present as he can possibly be, and he is the greatest refuge and he's the greatest strength, what do they have to fear? And brothers and sisters, notice what he says. Even though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble and as it swells. Even if everything breaks down around Israel, even if everything around Jerusalem falls to the ground, if everything in life breaks down, guess what? We will not fear. And we can talk all day about terrorist attacks, world governments, economies breaking down. Guess what? Here in Psalm 46, they were under siege. You know what that means? That means nobody went into the city, nobody went out of the city, the supply lines were cut off, the food was drying up, the water was, not present. And he says, you know what? We got no food, we got no water, we got no clothing. We got these people that are surrounding us. The world's breaking down. But guess what? We will not fear. And in light of everything that has gone on since about 2001, there are so many in the church that live their life based on fear. I mean, think about it. I'm not talking about going on a mission trip over to Iraq. I'm not talking about going on a mission trip, outside the country. I'm just talking about within the basic community that you live in. How many of us don't go to the place across the tracks because we're scared of getting mugged? How many of us don't go and pick the guy that's walking up the side of the road that he has a sign that says, "I need a ride," because, well, what if he stabs me? Or what if he robs me? And how many of us won't invest in the broken marriage that's in the congregation because we're scared about getting involved and getting a little bit messy? Because what if they don't like me anymore? We say, well, I've got to, curtail my faith. I've got to curtail my life to make sure that wherever I am, I'm comfortable with that. Now, hey, if you want to go door knock to the side of the street where everybody's a millionaire, I can do that because millionaires don't usually do harm to people. And so we live our life in fear, and we never experience the joy and the amazement of what God can do in people's lives who live their life not based on fear, but based on the eternal promise that no matter what happens in your life and in my life, God's always present. God's the fortress of my faith. And so if God is the fortress of my faith, if He is the building of my faith, if He is the master and commander of my faith, then there is nothing to fear. And guess what? That means I have the right and the privilege and the desire to go and do anything for Him. And he says in verse 4, in light of everything going on around Israel, even if the mountains were to give way, if the world were to break apart, he says, there is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. He goes, I know everything's breaking down. I know the world is in disarray. I know there's brokenness. I know there's violence. I know there's darkness. But guess what? There's this peace. There's this tranquility of knowing that God is present. And I want to ask a question, a rhetorical question of each of us here this morning. When was the last time you dwelled on the fact that when you woke up, God was present? That when you went to work, God was present? That when you left work, God was present? When you went and saw your family, God was present? That when you breathe, God is present? When was the last time we practiced presence of God in our life? Because certainly the psalmist says, man, this tranquility, this peace can only be found in the presence of God. Turn over real quick to Revelation chapter 22, verse 1 through 5. I think there's an interesting parallel found there. In Revelation 22, verse 1 through 5, it says, Then the angel showed me a river of water of life, bright as crystal, flowing from the throne of God and the Lamb through the middle of the street of the city. Also on either side of the river, the tree of life, with its 12 kinds of fruit, yielding its fruit each month. The leaves of the trees were of healing of the nations. No longer will there be anything accursed, but the throne of God and the Lamb will be in it, and his servants will worship him. They will see his face, and his name will be on their forehead, and night will be no more. They will need no light of lamp or sun, for the Lord will be their light, and they will reign forever and ever. Seems like the same sentiment found in Psalm chapter 46, verse 4. God is in the midst of her, and she shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. Here's the other thing, brothers and sisters. Like, when God is our fortress of our faith, we can understand that while things may not come, things that will come our way that will cause us, will test us, will try us, and guess what? It might even cost us our life. Ultimately, God has the ability to handle the wrongdoers. Someone asked me the other day, "Are you worried about ISIS?" And I said, "No." And a look of bewilderment came across their face. And I said, "What do you mean? You're a Marine. Why don't you worry about ISIS?" And I just calmly looked back and said, "Because on the day of judgment, God can handle that." Because on the day of judgment, no matter how many people ISIS kills, no matter how many Christian lives ISIS takes, at the end of the day, they can't handle God. And the follow-up question is, well, what do you think about this Syrian refugee thing? Should we allow the Syrian refugees to come across the border, and should the church take care of them? And I said, absolutely, positively, yes. And they said, well, what about the terrorists? And I said, what about God? What about God? I mean, we look at this situation and we have leaders and people in the church that live out that mindset of being fearful about accepting people into a country. Well, maybe, what if we took them, we evangelized them, and we sent them back to Syria? Have we ever thought that maybe in this time that God could use his people and use this situation to evangelize people, send them back to their country and evangelize the Middle East? But brothers and sisters, when we live our life in fear of the what if, we miss out on the God can. And we miss out on him being the fortress of our faith. We miss out on him being the refuge. We miss out on him being the peace, the tranquility. And most of all, we miss out on the power of God to move through our life. And he says, the nations rage and the kingdoms totter. He utters his voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. From the beginning of time, from the beginning of civilization, nations have been set up and nations have been brought down. And will continue to do so. I mean, the evil actors in the world who believe that they're going to reign and rule forever are kidding themselves. Because every country that has ever lived on God's timetable has a wine vat, Isaiah would say. And when that wine vat fills up, God brings that country, that nation, that people, that evil to an end. And I don't know, I could live until I'm 120 and ISIS could still be around. But guess what? At some point, it's gone. And you could live a life that is made up of nothing of broken relationships. But at some point, that pain and that agony and that hurt is gone. And finally, he says in verse 10, the famous verse, "Be still and know that I am God." And so the question that was submitted was, what does that mean and what does that look like? In the context, we've seen that verse is written in a time of, struggle, in a time of trial where circumstances and situations aren't ideal. And so what does it mean to be still and know that God is God? It means press pause on life, press pause on the doubt. Take a survey, step back and look at the big picture and understand who's in control. So how do I do that? How do I step back and I look and understand who's in control? See, there's situations and circumstances and times in life where we would say that they are, quote, God moments, right? Say God moments. So maybe for you, that God moment is a place outside of here. See, no, over there on that park bench, that was the first time I really had a conversation with God. Or maybe it's a person. Maybe for you, your God moment is, you know what, that kid over there, that child, God, the doctor said we never could. But God said, you did. Or maybe it's a journal. I don't know. Maybe you journal, and guys, it's okay to journal. All right? And maybe in that journal you write down, during the day, all of the things that God has blessed you with throughout your entire life. Or maybe it's this, what some people do, they have this God box. They have this box, and whether it's an item or an event, they either put that item in the box or they write down what happened in that event and they put it in the box. And so whenever times get tough, they go back to that box and they remind themselves of everything that God has blessed them with. Because when we do that, it reminds us not to doubt in the dark what we've learned in the light. And that would be my challenge for us. Whether it's a person, whether it's a place, whether it's a thing, whether it's a box, find that thing. Find that area. Find that. Make sure you remind yourself of that person, or write down those blessings, those times in life where you absolutely, positively know, hey, that was a God thing. And so when it starts to get dark and your world collapses and life punches you in the gut, you can go back to that fortress. See, Superman had the Fortress of Solitude. Things got tough. He went to his fortress and he talked to his Father. As much as I admire Superman, we have a way more awesome Father. And I would suggest that what God wants for us is to understand that He is our fortress. And that since He is our fortress, fear has no place in our life. So I want to ask you a couple questions as we close out this morning. The things that you're afraid of, are you afraid of them because you believe that God can't? Or are you afraid of those things because maybe God can? Because that's a totally different question, right? If I'm scared that God can take care of that, if I'm scared that God can relieve that, then guess what? I don't necessarily have a fallback that I can use as an excuse to not be afraid. And some people use fear to not chase after a relationship with God. And God says in Psalm 46, take a step back, look at who's in control, and ask yourself the question, why wouldn't you have a relationship with me? Just think about it for a second. Let's not talk about the world. Let's not talk about the country. Let's just talk about Gastonia for a second. What would the reaction be of this community if we rid ourselves of the fear, rid ourselves of the what if, rid ourselves of the doubt, stop doubting in the dark what we know is true in the light, and what if we just said, you know what? My fort, what I'm building my life on, what I'm investing in, what I'm going to use as my comfort, my strength, my refuge, my solitude is God. And what if the community saw people who were just fearless for the Lord? Who weren't concerned about placing their hope and their dreams in a politician or a celebrity or a sports athlete or their boss or money or possessions or you name it. What if the community saw a group of people that simply invested in being like Christ? You want to see change in your life? You want to see change in a community? Let's make sure that the refuge we're running to is not the superficial, but the supernatural. So this morning I'd ask a question. When was the last time that you were still and surveyed who's in control? What's your fortress? Is your fortress stuff? Is your fortress people? Is your fortress a politician? Is your fortress fear? Or is the fortress of your faith God? That's the question this morning. And maybe you've been running to the wrong stuff your entire life. Jesus said, my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Or maybe you kind of had a relationship with God and then you kind of were drifting off. Or maybe you live your life in fear. God wants to take that this morning as we stand and as we sing.